Welcome back, guys, to Bitcoin Magazine Live, episode 46. We're excited to give away some Bitcoin today, talk to NVK. We've got Nolan coming on for an episode of the Breakup, which should be awesome. And then I think we're going to round out today with Q doing some Bitcoin adjacent equities. Q, what are you looking at in terms of like the broader market today?
I think a lot of the conversation that Dylan shared with us yesterday, and if you guys missed it, be sure to check out yesterday's episode of Bedwatch. The correlation that we see between Bitcoin and the general markets right now, and just trying to see if maybe some of these Bitcoin adjacent equities that we talked about in the past, such as MicroStrategy in particular, are a little undervalued based on that correlation and just their Bitcoin holdings versus their total market cap. So excited to dive into some charts. Haven't had the chance to in a minute, and it'll be fun.
Absolutely. How are you feeling about the news and this crazy price action today? I've got, for whatever reason, I've got my little note is still stuck at 43.5, but I think we're more like 44 right now.
I mean, to be honest, like when the price goes up, I'm almost a little disappointed and sad, simply because the cheap stats are no longer on sale. But I think it also goes to show what we're dealing with. The market is volatile, both upside and downside. So it is it's pertinent to, I think, stay on your toes if you're not going long and you're trying to do some short-term trading rather than actually investing for the long. This is a tough market to be in, and trying to time things maybe isn't ideal. We'll dive into later. I know we're going to cut quickly to a commercial break and have NVK come now and join us, but we're seeing now rumors of a potential no rate hike come next week or the week after by the Fed, and that will be huge in determining market direction, I think, for the next 2 months, 3 months at least. But we'll see. We can only try to interpret the information that's been given to us. We can't really forecast or predict what will happen tomorrow. But before we do cut to a quick commercial, I do want to remind everyone to, if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button, stick around with us, stick around after the commercial break, and we'll be back shortly, guys.
All right, guys, welcome back. I'm super excited today. We're talking to, one of my favorite, or, the producer of one of my favorite products in the space, NVK of CoinKite. Here to talk about all of his awesome Bitcoin security signing devices, other Bitcoin kind of adjacent gadgets. So super excited to have this conversation. How's it going today, NVK?
Hey, thanks for having me, Alex. Yeah, good day. Fun, interesting events in the world and not so fun, interesting events in the world.
Yeah, it's really it's a mixed bag, man. I think we can all, agree at least that Bitcoin is needed now more than ever, and education in the Bitcoin space is needed now more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of folks are still not taking self-custody seriously enough, and I hope that Trudeau showed to them that how important it is for people to take their Bitcoins off the exchanges, right? Know your keys, know your Bitcoin. You're just sort of like a signature away from not having your coins anymore. It's quite scary.
That's a good way to put it. If you haven't heard that before, that'll definitely put some urgency into getting your keys off exchange, like, or rather moving your Bitcoin off the exchange. You're just one signature away from that not being your Bitcoin. Yeah.
It's crazy, right? I mean, like the way that Emergencies Act work, it doesn't even get voted when it gets enacted. The vote happens a few days later, so technically they could have taken your stuff and then accidentally lost it or whatever, and then you're fighting them years later, which you win the lawsuit, but you might not get your coins back. It's kind of like Japanese encampment sites in Canada where families got all their stuff taken from them, and then 20-30 years later they got like a 50 grand check.
Yeah.
It's
I
nuts.
mean, it's crazy, and there's also it's difficult, right? Because there are different solutions. Like in all cases, some exposure to some level of Bitcoin is better than none. But there are definitely better ways to, have custody of your own Bitcoin, or different layers of Bitcoin that you want access to if possible. And I think that's kind of what some of this self custody stuff comes down to. So, if we actually, I kind of want to go back and hear a little bit, if you don't mind, about your story and how you came to do what you do, if you'd like to describe that journey for us.
Yeah, so uh me and my business partner Dot Hacks, we came to the Bitcoin paper back when it came out on the slash dot. Was about 2010. Anybody who read that paper back then would sort of laugh and say that there's absolutely no way this thing was going to work, and that was true for still a few years after that. These are the days that if you want to buy Bitcoin, you go in an IRC chat and you see some of the pricing happening there, and then you go meet somebody at Starbucks with like a early 2000s like laptop, and then you give them cash, and they would sort of like transfer to you, and then you wait for confirmations. It was very awkward. Um, and we built a blockchain explorer back in 2011, late 2011. I think that's when BTC Look came out. The blockchain would fit in Redis, so it was still in memory. And that's kind of how we started to understand it. We were still working on other stuff, right? I mean, like Bitcoin was still sort of like internet magical money, right? And just slowly sort of like putting all the energy and all the time into like Bitcoin projects and Bitcoin payment terminals, Bitcoin debit cards, and then we had like a whole Bitcoin custody solution back then, and sort of wanted to get out of that business, and then eventually we decided to sort of like just do what we like, which is hardware, focus just on that, and make very secure hardware wallets for ourselves and for people that want it, and make open dime for people that wanted to transact physically. And that's sort of like we evolved with the space through time. That's sort of the journey.
Yeah, and it's been fun to watch. I mean, the occasion for bringing you on is really, you've got the Mach 4, I believe, of your cold card. So if you want to talk about that a little bit, the what's new?
Sure. So this is the fourth version in just a few years. It's almost like we kind of love the hardware development part, so we just keep on making new versions. Mark III is still undefeated, but we felt like there was a lot of room to improve. A lot of things we want to do because the market sort of like continues to move, right? Principally, there is a lot of people experimenting with multi-sig. So we wanted to give the device infinite memory relative to transaction size. So there is no bottleneck there. So this one, it's like, you know, the running joke internally is that it's infinite memory now, right? So transactions can be as big as the blockchain will take it. And it's a lot faster. It's going to have USB-C. It's time to change that connector. It's going to have a nice little sliding case, like a proper calculator.
There you go.
Yeah. We wanted to experiment with NFC, so that, you know, the UX to phones become a lot easier. There's more hardware wallets coming to the market from very large players that will also have NFC. We think that that's sort of like the technology that's going to dominate the space, because it is less complex than cameras. It's cheaper than cameras. You know, it's just yeah, go ahead.
Could we take a second and talk about NFC? Because I've heard you talk about it before, but I'm sure a lot of the audience don't know what that is.
Sure. So, you know, it's tap to pay, right? So everybody knows tap to pay. So now imagine tap to sign. So essentially, you're going to put your code card against your phone, and it's going to essentially push the PSBT file to your code card. And then your code card is going to say, do you want to sign this, right? And then you put your PIN, sign it, and then it sort of essentially transmits back to the phone in what we call contactless, right? So it's like very short range radio. So they have to be beside each other. What's cool
So I
about
literally,
the stack,
if I were to just demonstrate,
Yep.
you literally, it's just
Yep.
PSBT,
Yes.
signed, done, Bitcoin sent.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, I mean, you're still gonna have to put your PIN and stuff, right?
Right,
Who
right.
knows? Maybe actually no, it's just a check mark. No, you just press OK on the screen. Yeah.
You literally just okay. And
Yeah.
will the new ones will have pretty much the same layout, but you said
Yes.
also a case.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's mostly the same. We do have a new industrial designer who is like an absolute beast, and he essentially, what he did is, we're maintaining exactly what it is because that's what we love, but we're like doing it a lot better in terms of the actual engineering of the case, right? So where the support little spots are, and like just like it's tiny little things, right? Like the tolerances around connectors, the gap between the microSD and the microSD slot, you know, a little bit more room for the finger, that kind of stuff. And the NFC side, you're also going to be able to store. So, for example, put on the NFC tap an address, right? So you can take a give an address to a phone. You could also put a
wow.
BIP85 seed there. So say you want to load your Blue Wallet with a seed, BIP85 seed. We can give that BIP85 seed to the phone via NFC. You could do XPubs, anything really. So whatever is possible through QRs on the screen, or through microSD, or through USB, is going to be available through NFC as well. You know, we're super paranoid about this stuff. So, you know, if you don't want NFC, you can turn it off. It comes off on settings, but you don't have to trust the off. You can go and you can scrape a little trace near the microSD port, and it permanently disables it, right? So it doesn't work anymore forever, unless you go and you try to solder it back. But even then, it might not work great. So just so people know, personally, for my cold storage needs, I'm going to scrape it. I don't want my cold storage cold card to have any radios on.
Yeah, probably same, honestly. But that's great that you guys thought to include that. That's, I mean, that's exactly
like,
what you want. Transparency.
You know, yeah, like for my operational needs, right? So like my BIP85 stuff, or my like, you know, like let's call it the checking account where I do pay bills and whatever. I don't care. I'm going to have the NFC on there and just use it. So that's that on NFC. And then we also have a new feature called virtual disk. So essentially, ColdCard emulates a virtual disk via USB. So that means that if you don't want to use the microSD, you don't have to. You can just dump a PSBT file right on the ColdCard via USB. And ColdCard is going to sort of like read that. It's not real memory. It's not like, it's hard to convey, but it's very virtual inside the device. So it's not a lot of attack vectors there. And then you can sign it that way. You're going to be able to encrypt random secrets as well, and maybe store them on the device or a microSD card. What else? On the security side, we actually now have 2 secure elements instead of 1. So, and they're from different vendors. So now you'd have to break 3 separate chips: the MCU, secure element 1, secure element 2, to be able to extract a seed or do something malicious on it. So good luck to the attackers. You're going to have to spend some money and some time trying to break it. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, NVK, I had a quick question. So the NRC that's on there, NFC that's on there, when you're scratching it, I mean, that sounds really cool if you're using it as a device to do tap to sign and all that. I'd be kind of in a similar boat to you and Alex, using it more as cold storage. I guess it was a little worrying that you have the option to scratch and break it, but the last thing I'd want to do is scratch and break it and harm the device. I guess what's a way that you guys designed it to prevent that from happening and actually, damaging anything else except for the NRC?
Oh yeah, so first, we don't use standard thickness boards. We use a thicker board for the device, so it's very hard to damage it. 2 is, the trace is very easy to scratch. So like with a proper little knife or a screwdriver or something, right? So like it's very easy to scratch. It's very hard to scratch accidentally. If you're sticking keys in that hole, I mean, you're gonna probably break other things anyways. So I wouldn't worry about that. And the microSD material that's made doesn't really scratch PCBs either, right? So there is no concern about accidental scratching with the microSD.
Thank you. That gives me more peace of mind. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a good question.
NVK, if I may jump in, one of the features that, in my opinion, is actually my favorite feature of the MV4 or MK4, apologies, that you haven't actually touched on are these trick pins. Talk to us a little bit about that and sort of how they work and what either limitations they have or what they have that maybe isn't offered by any other cold card.
Yeah, so Mark III had 2 big limitations, right? One was the amount of memory for settings, right? And the very limited sort of capabilities of the secure element, which are on purpose, right? That secure element is like, it's almost just like a secure memory chip, right? There's very little they can do. With the secondary secure element that has more room and a few more capabilities, plus the more room in memory for settings on the MCU, we can do a lot more stuff. So instead of only having a pin to brick or a pin to duress or a pin to counter, right? The lockdown counter, for example, right? We can now make it fully dynamic. So that means you can choose what a pin does and even other secondary, tertiary sort of effects or actions, right? So you can say, for example, if I put this pin, I want the device to go into 24-hour lockdown, right? So it shows a counter for lockdown, but doesn't delete the seed. Or I want it to delete the seed with this other pin. Or for example, we can do delta now. Delta is really cool. So if I put my pin, but I add to the end of it the subtraction of the last 2 digits of my pin. So I do the math in my head. I wanted to delete the seed, for example. So I don't even need an extra pin. We just have like deltas, for example. And deltas are very well known in the safe industry. So this is a very common behavior, not for our
Mhm.
generation, but like anybody else who handles safes, physical safes, already know this stuff. Um, and we're trying to essentially add, like a absurd amount of optionality with pins, so that when an attacker, listen, an average attacker looking at a cold card is going to probably just try to beat you, right? But like a slightly more advanced attacker, somebody who's like taking you, coming into your house, or law enforcement, whatever, um, they will probably have done a little research on the device to begin with, right?
Mhm.
And what's cool is that if we have like an absurd amount of options, they do not know and cannot know which permutation you have, right, in your game theory of like which labyrinth you're going to take to your seed, right? So like, you can have like 10 different options that cause 10 different things, um, depending on which scenario you encounter yourself in. I think that's super important. Like, I don't want to put people in sort of like harm's way, with like, an attacker already knowing that like you only have a brick me pin, or you only have this one option or these two options. We want to sort of like broaden them up to essentially remove the symmetry of information that the attacker may have on you. That's sort of the idea on those the trick pins.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understand what you said. So the delta would be, I could in theory put the same pin that I have just to sign, just slightly shorter, and enter that instead, and that could brick the device. Did I mishear that?
Yes. Yeah, well, you would add, say your last two digits are 1 and 2. So
Mhm.
if you add another 1 after that, you would brick, or whatever you wanted to do.
Oh, so it's additional digits, not fewer,
Well, yeah,
or
it's
either.
it's an additional 1,
Hmm.
uh, but based on the math of the last two digits.
Okay, that makes
Like
sense.
you have to subtract them from one another and then add
Yes.
that final digit to the end.
Ah, okay.
So I am kind of curious because, and this could just be such an ignorant question, and I apologize if it is. But for example, if this wallet is now locked or under duress, are you guys involved at that point in helping the actual proper owner down the line later? Does the wallet eventually unlock? Talk to me a little bit about what I've gotten away from the bad guy. He held a gun to my head. I put the wallet into rest. It said no Bitcoin. I am now safe and free. Now, how do I get my Bitcoin back?
Well, you just put the right pin.
Okay, so it's literally as simple as that. The Bitcoin literally
That's
just
it. That's
love
it.
that.
But the cool thing is too, like, you might want to protect yourself further, right? Like, I cannot know where people live, what kind of situations they're in, and what kind of appetite they have, and what kind of like stomach they have for this kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
So, it's good to also be in a position where you literally cannot do anything, right? So having, say, for example, always a timer. So no matter what, for that specific device, it's always 3 hours, right? So maybe that is the solution for you, right? Because
Mhm.
you should you should definitely have more than one device, right? You should have a device that serves different purposes, right, in your life, especially as we move on to, um, you know, having more circular economies with Bitcoin, or maybe, maybe you do a little bit of trading, whatever it is that you might have other needs aside from just cool storage, or maybe you want to just de-risk your main pile into 2 or 3 different wallets, right, with
Mhm.
different thresholds or different just scenarios, even if that may be, geographically different places, right? So it it's important for people to sort of like create a little map on a piece of paper, right, and try to figure out case scenarios and build a tree, right, of like, okay, if, say for example, your prime minister decides to have an emergency act where they can open all the safe deposit boxes without court orders, and they can come to your house and beat you, right? What do you do in that case, right? Do you have maybe access to your Bitcoin from a different country, traveling naked, right, without a single piece of information on you, right? Do you, or for example, there's like a catastrophe, right? Like in your location, maybe you want to back up somewhere else. So for example, if you're going to use safe deposit boxes, you should probably be using seed XOR, right? So that if somebody gets into your safe deposit box, that seed that's sitting there is just a part of that seed, right? It's not the full secret. Or maybe it's multi-sig. I think everybody is going to have very different needs, right? So say, for example, you're a farmer, right? You can probably find some place in your field and bury your seed that nobody's going to ever find it, right? Like ever. But you live in a condo downtown as a single guy, right? Like there is no place to stick that thing, right? Like, you know, they're going to probably find it. So
Can I tell you a funny story real quick? NVK, so I come from like, you know, the country. We had like kind of like generally just like land in the family. Was considering whether or not to bury you know, some Bitcoin. And then we got hit with an eminent domain case for a private interest pipeline. And precisely like the area that I was planning way out in the wilderness to bury my card, like there was going to be uprooted and a ditch dug and pipe laid, which is absurd. It's just kind of a funny
no, it totally
anecdote of like,
yeah, these things can totally happen, right? I mean, and remember, right, when you sell the land, all the things that are in it go with it, right? So you have to think about multi-generational as well, right? Because your kids are going to probably inherit the same seed, and your grandkids might actually inherit that same seed too, right? When you think about like that sort of like time scale, it starts to get interesting, right? You know, what if somebody sells the farm? Now the new owners might actually have a claim to that BTC that was buried in it. It's super interesting.
Yeah.
and it
Go ahead, Alex.
kind of just speaks to how like there's no one solution for everybody, and I mean that like totally supports your thesis of optionality. So I do wonder, like, is there a base level of kind of options on the cold card that you think most users ought to use, or is it really case by case for you?
It's a bit of both, but I'd say like you know, it also depends on the amount of money you have, right? So you know, so let's say you just started Bitcoin, you just have a few $1,000s worth of Bitcoin, right? So it's not like a few $100, just keep on a phone wallet and that's it, right? I mean, really. But let's say now you have just a few $1,000s, right? It's like meaningful money to you. You know, make sure you have at least like one or two other pin options there, you know, maybe the brick me option or at least a timer option, just in case. You know, absolutely have a metal backup of that seed. You know, maybe, I don't know, like stick it inside the wall somewhere. And just in case of fire as well. And then you know, passphrase is nice. No, I wouldn't say it's like super necessary if somebody has a few $1,000s, but like it's definitely the next upgrade in your security. If you do have a passphrase, make sure you have a backup of the passphrase somewhere else, because you know, you could get hit by a bus and then, you know, family cannot get it, right? And the whole point of the passphrase is to extend the secret. So if you're doing the passphrase right, nobody can brute force it, right? So it's just something to keep in mind as well.
I wanted to ask if you could quickly, because I know this was confusing when I first used a passphrase. Could you explain the difference between the passphrase and the PIN to use your device?
Sure. Okay. So the PIN is nothing more than us protecting the device, right? The PIN has nothing to do with your seed. It's kind of like just like a safe box, right? You have a PIN to open the safe box. The gold inside the safe box is unrelated to the PIN, right? Now, Passphrases are inherent parts of the secret. So think about it this way. Your secret to move your Bitcoin is your seed, right? Now, if you have a passphrase, that seed is no longer the secret to move your Bitcoin. It's that seed plus the passphrase that's the combine of the two are the new secret to move your passphrase. Sorry, to move your Bitcoin, right? Passphrase is a terrible misnomer. It should have been called seed extensions, salt, something else. But it's the passphrases are not passwords. They're inherent parts of the seed now.
And when you just to be clear, when you add those passphrases, you cannot that's like a whole new derivation path if you were to kind of like bring up your wallet on a different physical device, right? You still need that same passphrase even if you have your 12 or 24 words.
That's correct. Yes. Because that is now your Bitcoin. Let's call it this way, right? I normally don't like to say the seed is the Bitcoin because it's kind of not technically true, but let's just, for sake of simplicity, right? Your Bitcoin is your seed. Now, if you use a passphrase, your Bitcoin is your seed plus passphrase.
So yeah, it's technically just a 25th word would be an easy way to describe it as well,
That's
right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yes. Now, when it comes to passphrases, I normally like to recommend people to not use special characters, to not use foreign characters, to keep it simple. Maybe use, say, 12 English words, maybe from BIP29. Just because, anything is supported, but it doesn't mean all devices support it, and there doesn't mean all devices will support it in the future, right? So you could be in a pickle where you have like complicated characters that don't have support in whatever device you're trying to use in a complicated situation in the future, right? So simplicity does help a lot too. And it's probably easier to remember as well, right?
Yeah, and that would be like the trade-off with the 25th word is you now have a new secret.
That's right.
Ideally to keep secret somewhere else apart from your other secrets.
Yeah, it's one of those things that so a good way of looking at it, it's like, say you have your 24 word or 12 word seed, right, in a seed plate, right, a metal backup plate. Now, if you use BIP39 words for your passphrase, you pick 12, so it's 128 bits, right? And you put in another plate because this plates support BIP39, right? So you essentially now have two plates. And because again, most people lose their Bitcoin because of fires, because of forgetting it, because of dying, things like that. We see that on support, right? Most people are not going to get robbed. So start from that premise, right? So just make sure you're not exposed to the very basics before you start complicating it.
We were talking about it yesterday, and one of the things I fear for, trying to have generational wealth and give it to my kids or great grandkids is, kind of the unknown. Exactly to your point. If you get in an accident, or if I get hit by a car tomorrow and then it's so complex that no one knows how to enter it or where it is, or even, God forbid, you start having memory loss, like dementia. So it's something that you have in your mind. Like, I know if you're escaping an authoritarian government and you don't want to be caught with it, it can work for a time of trying to go over, borders of a country with it just in your mind, or memorizing something and then restoring it and writing it down and putting it on a seed phrase. But I guess it's the fear of the unknown is my thing for me. If, it's so complex that no one can get into it, that's kind of what you're doing for your heirs. It's so complex, even they don't know how to get into it.
That's right. It's just so important to have, like, to document whatever setup you did, because it does come up, right? Especially to support, oh, my husband had this crazy multi-sig setup. You know what I mean? It's like 5 out of 10, and it's like, I'm sorry, we can't help you. Like, really, like, he didn't, like, there is no script, was on some armory setup, and there is services out there that might try to help, but like, it's not every case that's recoverable. So
Mhm.
a certain degree of simplicity goes a long way. It's like de-risk single points of failure, but don't overcomplicate it either, right? Especially relative to the amount of money you're trying to defend. I think that's sort of like super important. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Often on the show, I preach to people this is not a one and done kind of solution. Any security setup you have for your Bitcoin is going to change. Like I'm sure everyone, even on this call, feels differently about their Bitcoin today than they did in June of 2020 before, like a mega price run up. And suddenly you have 2, 3, 4 times the net worth to secure. So I tend to think of a proportion of my net worth should be allocated in terms of like raw funds to this security. But usually once that can be translated into time, like it's more education than anything else. Like these things aren't costly to do, especially doing them with cold cards. So I was wondering if you had any I guess just advice for people when they're thinking long term about their security and their Bitcoin.
Like it's kind of crazy that you can get some insane security for $100, right? I mean, it's pretty like just imagine like how much it would have costed to protect, a few $100,000, not even like lot money, right? If it was gold, okay, like a TL30 safe is going to run you a few grand. It's going to have to get installed on your basement, bolted to the ground. You're still going to want an alarm system for the house, and everything that goes around it, right? And that's just for a few $100,000 worth of gold. um, so you know when you're talking about $100 for a hardware wallet, and there's some that are even cheaper, some are even like free and DIY. It's an exponential security improvement to your setup. Um, and then just reflect on how much money you're trying to secure today. If that's going to be the same amount on the same setup tomorrow, right? A good rule of thumb is whatever you're trying to secure today, try to do the security if you was 10x more, because you don't want to have to move your money in haste, especially when it's worth more now. So like this happens a lot, right? Like people buy some
Hmm.
BTC, forget it on their phone wallet. This used to happen way more like back in the day. And then BTC, they forget it for a couple of years, and then BTC is 10x, right? And then they go look on their phone, and it's like, holy shit, it's worth a
Hmm.
lot more money now. uh and then like now you're sort of like, oh my god, I need to move this, right? And you do it without spending the time to research and understand what's going on. So like put in the time now, right? And
Yeah.
get things at least in your mind, is like, where do you want to go, even if you're not doing it right away.
Yeah, I can second that. I'm definitely someone who kind of jumped head over heels into security without knowing what I was doing a few years ago, and I didn't lose any Bitcoin, thankfully, but I did have that sudden midnight panic of like a realization, just like, oh wait, I fucked this up. Like this whole system could be compromised. Like I have to move this immediately, you know? And having to do that at a high fee with urgency is not fun at all. Like you
No,
really,
it's not.
like you said, you want time on your side, you want all the available resources on your side, so it's just kind of one step at a time, you know, thoughtful, low resting heart rate decisions when it comes to your Bitcoin.
That's right, right? You don't accidentally send it to the wrong address.
Yeah, absolutely.
MVK, I want to present a question, and I hope I'm presenting it and asking in a fair and appropriate way. But for you guys at CoinKite, what is the benefit of keeping your code to yourselves rather than having it be open source?
So it is open, right? It's not like there's a massive discussion of like, and nobody can agree on like, what considers free open source and what isn't. Um, you know, I'm thinking defensively. when we decided to change the license because we started having cloner problems, right? I believe in fairness, and I don't think it's fair for somebody to come take the code without a single contribution and then go raise VC money on top of it and try to compete with us. It's like, you know what, go fuck yourself. You know, so I changed my license, right? We changed it to something that is still fair to the users. It's like you can take it, you can modify it, you can give it to somebody, like you can even sell your copy of it. Like it doesn't matter. You just can't build a business on top of it. I think that if things had gone differently, right? If people had contributed to the source code, I think even legally I wouldn't have been able to change the license if they had really contributed to it. So that's sort of like where it's at. I just, you know, I think it was. I think I'm defending the capability of the company to monetize its work and reinvest that in even more security, right? You know, we're not chumps, so we're not going to play that game.
That makes total sense. And I don't see I think there's sometimes this back and forth that people have, and you bring up an excellent point that there's no consensus on what is appropriate or what should be done. If it's your work, it's your work. What you choose to do with your work, I think, is ultimately prioritizing yourself, your business, and your customers. That seems like a very straightforward through line. Thank you for
Yeah,
detailing that out.
yeah, and it's a very fair question, right? You know, we contribute to a lot of open source, free open source. We fund a lot of stuff that we don't publicly talk about. You know, I think like each project and each thing that we do is going to have different sets of trade-offs, you know, and you know, if like the purity of the license is important to you, then either use an older version of our source code, which you can, and you can continue developing that, or go with something else.
Could you maybe, and if there's nothing that has come of this, that is completely fine and acceptable as well. But we've seen now where you are up north in Canada, we're seeing it in Eastern Europe as well. We're seeing the importance of self-storage, of privacy, of really owning your own Bitcoin. Is there anything that in this newest model, or maybe in an upcoming update that you guys are working on, that is a direct result of what you've seen happen over the last month in the world?
Yeah, so this is something that I don't know if I'm addressing the question like correctly, because I'm not sure I get it, but like just for example, in regards to say supply chains, right? Or because that's like a concern right now, or in terms of like government coercion or tentative to say change stuff or try to, I don't know, like give us bad chips or something like that, right? This is something that it's always been part of how we design the device. We don't trust any of the parts of the device in our architecture, right? You know, trust minimized, right? Like there's no such thing as no trust, right? So, you know, the MCU doesn't trust the secure element doesn't trust the MCU. That's how things are sort of like stored inside the device. That's why you have to break both. And then we use off-the-shelf parts, right? So these are parts that automakers are using, that like printers are using. So, you know, in order for, you know, the economic effort that a government would have to go through to produce, you know, tens of thousands of chips that are part of a million chip production to affect just CoinKite on a specific thing related to what we do, it's kind of absurd, right? And even if they did, it wouldn't be the end of the world now, because now they have to do that to 2 chips, and now they're going to have to do that to 3 chips on the new model, right? So, you know, it's a lot easier. See, like when you're dealing with a state actor like that has the capability of altering silicon on a chip to attack a specific vendor that uses that chip, you know, they're gonna send their SWAT team to your house first. Like, I mean, it's just so beyond like unnecessary, right? To go through all that effort because of us. We're still a niche product, right? We're not like the shitcoin like solution that has a much broader market. Uh, so the cost effort to attack our customers is going to be too great and not worth it. And then when it comes to supply chain, you know, the device is designed in such a way that, you know, if they capture the device in transit to a customer and try to do something with it, it'll become very self-evident, unless they're going through some absolutely insane level. And I'm talking about like few $1 million per unit to try to do something stupid, which might still be completely resolvable by just flashing the firmware. And then again, right, if they're spending this per user, might as well send the SWAT team to their house, right? So it's I think we've achieved a level of security that suffices most people's paranoia needs.
And NVK, I had a quick question for you. So in the current state of the world, kind of going back to that, trying to escape an authoritarian government or overreach from a corporation or whatever it may be, I'd say, you know, Bitcoin on the main stage, while it is getting some spotlight and, you know, Bitcoiners, we love it, but I would say it's still pretty unknown compared to the world globally. It's not, you know, everyone knows what the internet is and such. Do you have, do you worry about your products becoming more recognizable, that, you know, I'm going across the border and instead of them just thinking it's a calculator, they understand that it's a cold card? I know I like open dimes and the way that they look, you could throw those on a keychain and someone would just think it's like a thumb drive or a USB drive. Do you have future iterations that might even deviate or change the way that it looks to be, I guess, more camouflage would be the way to describe it?
So I think, you know, as much fun as we'd like to have with the idea of like camouflage, let's put it that way, it's all theater. Realistically speaking, you know, as soon as hardware wallets become a concern for governments, they'll simply add to the image recognition software on their X-ray machines at the airport, and they'll immediately just say, like, cold card version, whatever. Like, it really. So, like, I really would like to discourage people from taking hardware wallets or Bitcoin devices through airports. And if you do, make sure that you have a brick me pin set up. Um, and you know, like, if you do have to carry your seed through borders, you know, maybe a micro SD card is the way to go, or maybe, you know, writing on the Bible or something, whatever it is, or just, you know, memorize it. I don't think it's a good idea. And also, you could be breaking laws too, right? There are capital control laws through airports. If you don't declare it, is a problem. And you get tricky because the keys are with you. So, you know, watch out on that. We do have a new product coming that they'll be a little bit easier to take through airports, but still not a good idea. Like the tap signer and the sats card, they're just cards. But still, you know, if you are a person of concern, or Bitcoin now became a concern through borders, I think it would be a very bad idea to do that.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Yeah, I can feel it. I find it's pretty fun to bring open dimes while I travel, just as like a fuck you to TSA. But yeah, I probably would not head out of the country with my cold card unless I had kind of. I mean, can you factory reset a cold card? Like, could I take the 12 words, let's say, memorize them, and then reuse my same device? Let's say you're fleeing Ukraine and
Yes.
you just want to read. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally doable. Maybe, you know, yeah, I mean, that's totally doable. One feature that I want to do, that's on our to-do list for the new version, is going to be for you to drop a picture from your camera into the virtual disk, and we are going to stick the cold card backup encrypted inside that picture file, and then you can put it back in your camera or something. And then it's like, now you essentially just have a picture file that looks like a picture file. You know, unless they do deep data analysis on that, it's it's definitely heated.
So hang on, that would be somewhere in the metadata of the photo, you've got your whole device just virtually backed up?
Yep.
Wow, that would be cool.
Again, right?
Interesting.
Like these things are very easy for deep data analysis to figure it out, right? The same way they can figure out if your laptop has an extra partition or something.
Mhm.
But you know, it's one more tool, right? We
Yeah.
want to make it so that the cost of trying to analyze for all the options is so great that the attackers don't pursue that.
Yeah, I love it. There's lots of you know, just kind of short term like quick fix solutions, longer term like it works great for just permanent kind of don't touch storage. Do you want to talk about the cards that you're coming out with a little more?
Sure. Okay, so there's two cards. Sets card is essentially an open dime NFC with 10 reuses because there's 10 slots in that chip, and it's going to be a lot cheaper. But you know, it's going to require some wallet integration on the wallet apps. It's almost ready to be sent to devs to start sort of looking if they want to integrate or not. And then Tap Signer is essentially a private key in a card. So it's kind of like a hardware wallet that's blind signer. So you do get a pin. It's a changeable pin. And then say, for example, you're using Blue Wallet. You don't want a full-blown hardware wallet. You just want to tap to sign transactions. You can do that with Tap Signer, or you can use it for multi-sig. You can use it for message signing, all kinds of things like that. It's one of those products like we don't yet know how people are going to use it. We just want to make it.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds fun. We've got about 10 more minutes here, guys. So between Q and Chris, do you have any kind of last questions that we want to ask?
Yeah, I'll go first. NVK, do you have any surprises that you're going to drop for us at the conference that you can maybe get excited or at least give inklings to our listeners about potential products that are coming out, or any surprises that we want to know about?
So if it wasn't for all this shit show in the world, we do have the dev in the other side of the planet. We were hoping to have the cards maybe ready to at least demo at the conference. So I don't know yet. So there is a chance. It's still sort of hanging in the air. And don't know. Maybe a Mark IV comes around for demoing. And yeah, so I don't have. We're terrible at marketing, like with regards to like keeping secrets and sort of holding them for announcements. We just sort of like, you know, yay, we push the branch. Oh, let everybody know, kind of thing, right? So I hope that we have things to show people there in person, that are like ready to go or close to ready to go. That's my hope for Bitcoin Miami. I'm
Nice.
really looking forward to being at the beach.
Me too.
Beyond just some announcements on your guys' end, is there any speaker, anything at the conference that you're really excited for?
I mean, you guys, like, how many speakers do you have now? Like 1,000? I mean, is there anybody who's not in Bitcoin who's not speaking at the conference? It really, it's like it's pretty crazy. I mean, you guys should change it from conference to festival. You know, it's time to rename it. It really drives me insane that I missed the last one. You know, with the travel restrictions and stuff, was very difficult. So yeah, I mean, I think it would be really cool to see what El Salvador is going to announce. And you know, I saw that Peterson is going to speak. I'm curious to see what he's going to talk about Bitcoin. It's just fun to see all these people who had not had to understand Bitcoin the last few years, who finally understood Bitcoin, to see like what they have to say. because they're kind of like the new wave of people coming in. So it's just very curious to see how they understand Bitcoin. And I was just looking forward to hanging out with a bunch of Bitcoiners again, and all the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the open-mindedness there, because we also get a lot of backlash for having anyone other than like certified OG Bitcoiners speak at the conference. But I'm with you, man. I'm just curious to hear people's takes. You can learn things from very, very stupid people. And no one at our conference that's speaking is like very stupid person. You know what I mean? They're all gonna have something interesting to say. I'm for it. I think it's gonna be great.
You know, like, nobody understood Bitcoin years ago, right? Like, the majority of the people always thought Bitcoin was a store of value, sorry, a medium of exchange, right? Like, it's kind of fascinating. That's why how the block wars came to be and all this stuff, because, you know, aside from, I think, Trace Mayer, everybody else always sort of like saw Bitcoin as payments. We saw Bitcoin as payments. We used to make Bitcoin payment debit cards, right? So it's just nice to see, like, you know, the understanding evolving, and seeing how all this new people sort of see it too. You know, nobody holds, there is no idols, and nobody owns the podium of Bitcoin, right? Plus, we're all tired of hearing people like myself talk too. It's like, you know, bring on some flesh blood.
You never. NVK, I want to throw a one quick question from Shane Trammell in our chat. Can you clone an MK3 to an MK4 when it is released?
Yes. So starting on MK3, we have this new feature called cloning. So essentially, there is a little dance with the microSD. The microSD goes to the destination first. It gives it a key, and then it goes to the source, which essentially creates a handshake. So now you have an encrypted backup without needing to know the password to move between the two. You just have to keep both on. It's an ephemeral key, and then you can just securely transfer between them. So, you know, if a CO9 team drops in your house in between moving that card, you don't have to worry. They can take the card and you're okay.
All right. I'm now protected from SEAL Team 6 breaking into my home. So thank you, NVK, for that.
That's a large claim.
That's awesome. NVK, do you have any you know, final thoughts, words of wisdom, or pitches you want to make for your products? Love to hear them.
No, I mean, you know, I just you know, go check out, like, people should just go read the docs and learn about them. There's just so many features that are completely sort of underused or and just unknown, kind of like the BIP 85. You know, we had that feature sitting on COLDCARD for, like, I don't know, a year or two now, and like finally people realize that. You know, go check out, like, you know, a seed XOR. It's like a huge upgrade to your seed security. Yeah, just go read. There's so much you can do with it.
Yeah, I will say that's been kind of one of the more exciting parts about, like, kind of like my own CoinKite product journey, is just like reading all the documentation you guys have done on all these you know, variety of security elements that you have. And otherwise, it's a pretty fun website. We'll definitely drop some links in the chat here.
Awesome, guys.
Yeah, for sure. All
I
right.
think we should also throw some stats in the chat for everyone who's been sticking around and hearing all the NVK had to share. I mean, I told the two of you, this is a little bit out of my depth. I learned a ton. NVK, thank you, man. It was a wonderful education experience. I have some places and questions I know better how to ask, and things I know I'm gonna be educating myself on. So thank you. At least you helped one person learn a lot more about this space.
Hey, it was my pleasure. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Great to have you on, MVK. After I get to play with the MK4 a little bit, I'll look forward to having you on again to chat more. Thanks so much for joining us today, man.
Take care, guys.
Take care. All right, guys. I think that was awesome. If you're just tuning in, please, go back and listen to the discussion. Get ready. Go order your tickets if you have not yet for Bitcoin 2022. NVK is going to be speaking. We're all going to be there excitedly sharing, what we know about Bitcoin and also just kind of enjoying the company of people with similar interests. So outside of that, I think it's fair to say this is probably one of the biggest job opportunities you could have. I'm not personally hiring anyone at the conference, but I know a lot of people who are, a lot of scouting. I think this is going to be one of the bigger networking events in the tech finance industry and just in general. I mean, you don't have to be like a computer programmer to come find a job in Bitcoin. I'm not. I'm a very dumb person, managed to find good jobs in Bitcoin, guys. I highly recommend you come out to the conference and just get to know some people, network. Use our promo code YTMAG for 10% off your tickets. I look forward to seeing you all there.
What is up, guys? Thank you for sticking around through that commercial break. And we are bringing it back. Bitcoin adjacent equities, a new episode. I will be fully transparent with you guys. We have no pre-planned equity. I have not drawn anything on the charts. I was going to go pull up a Bitcoin chart and a Nasdaq chart to start. Those of you in the chat, throw in either MicroStrategy, Block, whatever Bitcoin equity that you'd like me to dive into the chart of, throw it in the chat and I'll dive into that chart once we talk a little bit about the Nasdaq and Bitcoin's correlation to it. So let me just share my screen. Boom, 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 boom. All right. So we have Bitcoin, and then let me change this to Nasdaq. Pause. Boom. All right. Sorry, that's a little messy. But one thing that I want to really highlight right now is the Nasdaq hit its all-time high on November 22nd and has pretty much been in this free fall, if you will, since. When we zoom out of the Bitcoin chart, we're just going to go full screen on this one. We see an all-time high was reached on November 10th. Now, let's go over to the November 22nd date, and that was a down day for Bitcoin. If you recall, actually, nope, wrong button. If you recall, this is actually technically a down day, November 22nd, for the Nasdaq as well. All right, and we lost one line. So this tells me that we had a lot of downward pressure on this day, but in addition to the downward pressure seen in the general markets, Bitcoin was already on its downturn. It was 22 minus 9 is 13. So we had about 2 weeks already where Bitcoin was declining before the Nasdaq got the message, hey, everything's going down. we're seeing signs of this reversal from a couple of days ago, and I want to highlight this as well. So this reversal happened on the 24th. That was the big reversal the day after Russia invaded Ukraine. My expectations literally getting dropped off at the airport on February 23rd, telling my dad, everything's going to crash. I'm going to buy everything and let's just see what happens. And sure enough, you get an open right at the day's low. You get a close right at the day's highs. And you also see it close above the day before's lows. This is a huge reversal sign, just as a technical indicator on a normal stock chart. Right now, this is the Nasdaq chart, Nasdaq composite. This is called a piercing pattern. Because we've had a nice long piercing pattern into this, expectations are so long as we can hold above the low from February 23rd, market could actually enter an uptrend very soon and very quickly. I believe today, what is the total that we are up? Market beat, market trend. Let's look at volume. So while we are seeing an increase in the Nasdaq of over 1%, this is the perfect signal for a potential follow-through day. For those who read the Blockware blogs or are familiar with growth investing strategies from Investors Business Daily, essentially a follow-through day happens on day 4 or later of a reversal. This was day 1. This was the first day of the reversal. So long as we do not break, I'm putting the low here. Technically, the low should be below the low of this day, but I don't buy that. I really would like to see this low not broken. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Yesterday was the first day we could have the follow through day. We went down, so that's negated. Today, we are up over 1%. However, the volume today is well below yesterday's. We're 10% below. If the volume stays this low, it will not count as a follow through day, even if it goes up 10%. Let me pull up really quickly this stream so I can see what you guys are asking for. Okay, so no one's asking for an equity, so we're going to keep going down this rabbit hole so long as you guys will entertain me or Alex pulls the plug. One big thing that I want to point out, and if I can just move that, thank you. So February 24th, this is the day of that reversal, and you see a long wick down and a long wick up. With a Bitcoin chart, I'm not really so much concerned with the wicks. I'll treat the days low and days highs accordingly. So we do see that, hey, you have this lower low here. You actually, though, have a higher high here. Now, that's an even greater signal for a reversal if this entire thing was a body, essentially a full bar. What we're going to see here at this point is some sort of push higher. You have the Nasdaq going up today while Bitcoin seems to be going down for now. What I'm really curious about as far as the Nasdaq chart goes is this 21-day exponential moving average, which for the last 3 days essentially has looked like some form of a resistance for the Nasdaq. You have Can you hear me now? Sorry about that, guys. So what I was saying before was exactly 1 month ago today was the first attempt at breaking above this 21-day exponential moving average. However, the reversal down happened very quickly, and within the next session, we were back below it. Another head fake a week later, an attempt to break above this line literally 1 week later. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back above it. And the following day, we even tried to spend some time above it. I'm going to dive really into this chart now. So this is the day after the second attempt at breaking above the 21-day exponential. Yet again, we see an inability to hold above that line. And that is going to be critical to see how far the Nasdaq can actually go. Now, these both also correlate back to a low seen on January 10th. And in our previous attempts at sort of diving into and really breaking down what the Nasdaq chart looks like, we know that there's other resistance here based on the fact that this also correlates to the lows from September 20th. This also has correlation to the upside gap seen here on October 6th and 7th. So this tells us we have a very strong level of resistance right here that was tested 3 times with an inability to break above. So right now, our priority number 1, get above this 21-day exponential moving average. I'm not so concerned about this level of resistance at this time right now, because the 21-day exponential is truly the lowest level of resistance above us. We really need to prioritize getting above that and holding above that. Volume will help, buying volume will help. We saw an increase in volume on this day of the reversal of about 40% above the previous days. So the volume on February 24th was 40% higher than the volume on February 23rd. That means 40% more buyers were coming in, 40% in total for the entire day. This is a huge shift in market sentiment. Awesome. So I quickly want to show some sentiment from Investors Business Daily. They do an excellent job of this. They are not a sponsor, but if they want to ever sponsor, we'll so gladly do that. Hope you're listening out there at Carson. We're going to look at 3 charts very quickly. The volatility index, the VIX. This is something that Dylan has brought up during deep dive segments as well as yesterday. The put call ratio, which is one of my favorite reversal indicators, and the bulls versus bears. We're going to start with the bulls versus bears. This is as simple as it comes. They literally take all of the writing about the markets and they determine, is this person writing bullishly? Is this person writing bearishly? Does this person have sort of a no direction in mind? Now, we saw back in the end of last year, a good majority of the time was spent above this 60% bullish indicator. And this is a huge reversal sign. I remember feeling so uncomfortable, excuse me, being in the market each time this level broke above. However, since roughly November 22nd or 24th, apologies, from last year, we've seen a steady decline of this. So right here, the peak was November 19th. That's 5 days before that all-time high was hit on the Nasdaq, and then we reversed lower. So ever since then, we've steadily been declining. Now we are approaching, but have not yet reached the point where the bearish sentiment is higher than the bullish sentiment. This is a reversal indicator. We are approaching, however, they have not intersected. We saw this back in March of 2020, and I don't need to remind everyone here what happened in March 2020 after a big, fast, sharp decline down. So began one of the greatest bull market runs that many people took advantage of. So the bull bear sentiment indicator is approaching a point of reversal. However, we are not yet there. Put call ratio takes all of the put orders that are out on the market, all the call orders out on the market, and essentially creates this ratio. Anytime the indicator goes above 1.15, that essentially says that there's too much negative sentiment in the market. Too many people are saying the market's going to go down. And this has, typically in the past been an indicator that, hey, we've reached or are nearing a bottom and a reversal is coming. Truth be told, the 0.6 level also was previously a level of a reversal. However, as you can see here on this chart, much of last year spent some time below this 0.6 level. This is akin, and I'm annoyed at myself for having closed it, but we're going to open this back up. This is very similar to the bull versus bear indicator that saw a good majority of 2021 spent above that 60% sort of reversal threshold. I'm not saying that 0.6 is negated or it's no longer valid. I'm just saying that this market has not been acting appropriately. And so while we are trending higher and the bearish sentiment has continued to increase, based on the fact that the bullish sentiment indicators did not actually trigger at the right time, I would be very, very patient. And I would like to see multiple indicators signal to me a reversal is coming rather than just focusing on one. So that's why I'm taking the time to show you guys both put call ratio as well as the bulls versus bear indicator. Both of those I love to use purely as a sentiment analysis of what the general market looks like. We're going to dive into the VIX for a brief moment, and then we will dive into Riot. So just hang tight, guys. And for the VIX, We are seeing the VIX continue to steadily increase despite, oh, it's down today, oh, it's up tomorrow. This is purely feeding into the volatility of the market. We see back in the January 24th, a 52-week high was reached. No, that's not 52 weeks. 3 quarters. So a 9-month high was reached in the VIX on January 24th. Now let's go take a look at this chart, the Nasdaq. January 24th was boom, right here, the previous all-time low that we had hit. Let's go look at the VIX now, February 23rd and February 24th. February 24th, we have, I believe, an increase of, I see. Okay. So this long red right here is February 24th, the day after Putin invaded Ukraine. The day before that, which was the previous low and the low that we're treating, we saw an increase as well, but a very small candlestick. This day, however, it's going to be, I know what to do. Okay. This is 24. This is 23. There are 2 key things that I'm looking at and seeing. Both of these have long candlesticks. This is different than long wicks. This is different than a candlestick chart. So keep that in mind. The dash across is where the actual VIX closed for the day. The entire line that's vertical, that is the entire price range of the VIX for that day. On the 24th, we see such a long range of price action for the VIX, and it closed right here near the bottom. The day before, which saw the low that we are using, this low right here, we see not as long a candlestick. I would not as long of a price range. I would call this probably half the range of this, just purely looking at it. I'm not looking diving into numbers here. And then we see it close at the high of this. So this is signaling to us, hey, we are seeing an increase in volatility. What I'm taking away from this one, from the day of the 24th, that big reversal candlestick, that's telling me, hey, there was a big push up. There was a lot more volatility. However, it began to get muted as the day went on. And by the end of the day, it seems to have found a more appropriate level. It closed below the day before's lows, signaling potentially a decrease. We saw it continue to decrease for one more day. And then, of course, everyone realized what they had done over the weekend and started panicking. So we are seeing the VIX almost trade in tandem with the 21-day exponential moving average, this green line right here. That is not a good thing. That is very dangerous. That is signaling that if the VIX is unable to break back below the 21-day, this is one of the few charts you actually want to see the VIX below the 21-day exponential, because it will provide some sort of resistance above us. The lower the VIX is, in my opinion, calmer the market will be. The VIX is purely measuring volatility. So there's no necessarily once it's below 20, it's going to reverse lower. There isn't really a low point and there isn't really a high point. If we want to go back to really showcase this in 2020, that March 2020 that we all know, some of us know and love, some of us know and hate, it reached a high of 85. Right now, the high is 35.19, and in February it was 37.79, and in January it was 38.94. So it was more than double where we're at today. So unfortunately, we don't really have a level of high or low as far as, hey, this is where we're screwed. This is the moment where it's going to reverse, or this is the moment where things are going to start crashing. So let's get out or let's get in. The VIX doesn't really have that type of a barometer, as well as something like the put call ratio or the bear versus bullish sentiment. However, it is very important to recognize a couple of things in this chart. This is a monthly chart for the last 13 years of the VIX. For the most part, other than period of 2008 during the Great Recession and other sort of hiccup periods seen throughout the last 13, 14 years, for the most part, these monthly candlesticks are fairly muted within a certain range. And then they follow this pattern of have a big spike up and slowly and steadily reverse down lower, spike up, reverse lower, spike, reverse lower. And then here we are in the COVID markets, where we see big spikes up. We do see this reverse lower. However, I want to highlight this. These wicks are much wider. The price range is much wider right now than it has ever been historically during these periods of downturns. This is a further and deeper signal that we are in a lot of volatility. It is going to be very interesting to see how the markets react. And I think, unfortunately, the markets right now are focused primarily on a buy or sell based on news updates and alerts. It's a very dangerous and tough market to be in. I personally have actually been a net seller for a good part of this year, as well as towards the end of last year. However, I have started to look at some options. I know are not literal options, but options as far as what types of companies to put money in. I do have some longer term holdings that I've still held on to even during this most recent downturn. Hammersaw, you bring up an excellent point, man. The indexes are your friend, especially right now. I'm a big believer in, for those who are maybe not as well versed or don't necessarily understand what's going on or how the impacts of what Joe Biden says during the State of the Union will impact your portfolio. I'm a much bigger fan of telling people, like, find an index. If the S&P 500 is really all you know, that's fine. Buy some SPY shares. Go through it through that angle. And if you want to start investing more or learning more, or, hey, you think, you know what, I'm going to put half of my portfolio in SPY, but I really like Tesla, or I really like Microsoft, or I really like MicroStrategy. Fine. Have a portion of your portfolio in ARK or in SPY or some sort of a QQQ double leveraged Nasdaq index, and then turn around and feel free to buy individual shares of those stocks or companies that you're like, I rock with this company. I believe in what they're doing. I like the leadership of this. I like their product, whatever it is. I have a personal rule that I made for myself, which is, if I like a company's product so much that I want to actually like spend the time to go and buy it, or I'm going to spend my real hard-earned money buying a Tesla or buying an iPhone, or last year, my big one was a PS5. I really wanted a PS5. I still don't have one. PlayStation or Sony, if you're listening, feel free to sponsor us. But instead of, taking the Biden bucks I was getting and spending it on a PS5, I, no joke, went and bought Sony shares. And I ripped Sony shares all the way up above 120. And my entry point was about 74, 75 a share. I enjoyed those profits and laughed laps around all my friends who were trying to buy a PS5. And look, man, the PS5 is still on back order. Goes to show you, A, the product, but B, just how big of an impact and influence it has. I believe Sony stock has actually been correcting during this market correction as well. And I'm not going to spend too much time on that. We right now have the Riot Blockchain chart pulled up, and I need to zoom out of this a little bit because we have a lot of volatility to go over. So November 9th is the day of Bitcoin's all-time high. And November 24th is the day of the Nasdaq's all-time high. All right, let's pull up this question real quick. So a real quick, Hammer. So I will say this about the yield curve. It's a little tough to, like, you can track it, and I do from time to time. However, the yield curve for the last couple of weeks, or since about January, so the last 6 weeks, had been pricing in 2 basis points hikes. However, now the yield curve has been reversing ever since Russia invaded Ukraine. And now there's conversations that there won't be any rate hikes. I'm more focused on what the Fed does than what the market thinks it's going to do. I'm big on, rather than trying to forecast or predict what's going to happen, trying to analyze what has happened and make educated assumptions on what I think may happen within a boundary of ranges. I will never say absolutely, oh, it's going to go up or down. I like to use percents and say, there's an 80% likelihood it hits this price level. There's a 70% price likelihood it hits this price level below it. Doesn't have to add up to 100. It just has to be what in a downturn scenario, how likely is it to hit here? In an upturn scenario, how likely is it to hit here? So I know where my floor is, how to protect myself and protect my money, and how to exit with profits. That is a big key, exiting with profits. Just because you hold a stock and it went up does not mean you made money. You make money once you sell it. So really quickly on this Riot chart, and then we're going to cut to a commercial break. We see here on the day Bitcoin had an all-time high on November 9th. Riot also did not have an all-time high. This has been tried and true for many of our Bitcoin adjacent equities. I'm going to turn actually to the weekly chart just because there's a lot going on here. So, and then this is the November 24th, week of November 24th. Actually, I should have a daily for this, and then we'll go back to weekly. Okay. So November 24th is just some middling day for Riot. In fact, despite the Nasdaq going down, Riot saw an increase for 1, 2, and then an open above before starting its very steep, hard, tough, scary downturn. When we previously brought up Riot, we brought up these areas as potential support and resistance. As we see, we've essentially crashed through everything. But something that's very interesting is this right here, where we see our price action occur, is actually correlating right to this downside gap from here. Keep in mind, we did not draw this line. That line stems from this low. So with this low, all the way from January 2021, which had not ever been tested since it essentially reversed higher from there. That was sort of a floor in the sand for Riot when I was originally charting this out. As we can see, based on the price action for between January 20th and 21st, a nice little gap down below this line has officially secured this as a nice level of resistance. We saw it tested here and here. An upside gap here in an attempt to regain, unfortunately, was reversed lower. And now we find ourselves back inside of no man's land, inside of this downside and upside gap. Riot's a lost puppy right now. There's no clear direction. There's no clear direction as far as Riot at this moment. An attempt to hold on to the 21 exponential moving average will, I think, be the first line in the sand. And then we also are going to use, frankly, where it's at right now, which it correlates back to the downside gap from January and the upside gap in early February, as far as sort of another area of either support or resistance. Tomorrow's open will be very telling. My expectations right now are, especially if it closes just like this right now, there's no telling what's going to happen. This is too indecisive, but depending on how it closes, should close near the highs, we can set expectations that we might get a little bit of resistance here at about 18.22 a share, the highs from the day before. If we're seeing a close near the lows, my expectations would be that it's going to be stuck in no man's land. If we can get out of this area right now where it's currently trading, that would be ideal. But any close inside of this range would be essentially a no direction or just sort of lost in its chart. It's tough sledding out there right now in the equity markets. I think really the focal point is going to come down to what Powell says and what his decisions are with rate hikes. Feel free to Slack or DM me on Twitter, Q_like the letter. If you have any questions or want to go over anything that I've discussed here, or maybe a different stock, I'm happy to dive into anything with you guys. But stick around shortly. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break, and we're going to be joined by Nolan for a new episode of The Breakup. markets? No. Why? Why not? I mean, we've stressed the importance of attending this conference beyond just, you know, the people who are going to be there, the event itself, what it means to Bitcoin at large. But as Alex touched on a little bit before, if you do not work in Bitcoin but want to, you need to attend. Like, this is the most important thing you can do for yourself this year, is getting yourself down to Miami, showing face and shaking hands. It's who you know, not what you know. That's a hard truth about life. You need to shake hands. You need to show up, and you will see and make an impression on people and businesses that will change your life. If you are trying to work in Bitcoin, attending the Bitcoin conference in Miami is mandatory. Use code YTMAG to get 10% off, and use Bitcoin to buy your ticket to get 33% off. If that's not enough, shoot us a DM. We'll figure it out. If you want to be there because you want to work in Bitcoin, we will help you. So just shoot me a DM and we can figure something out. And now,
and if you come by our little show. We're going to be recording this live, aren't we? We're
oh,
going to be doing all this
we're,
live.
we're going to be doing some big things live at the conference, but if you want to see it live in person, meet us and actually shake Nolan's hand. He will actually appear in real life for once. I'm still convinced he's a figment of our imagination, but
I'm a real person.
How you doing today, Nolan?
I love life, and we're going to be talking about figments of our imaginations, things that weren't there today. That's part of what we're talking about, things that aren't there, things that we didn't see. So for all our viewers who are not American, I'm going to be talking about something called the State of the Union today. The State of the Union is a pretty big deal in American politics. It's a yearly event where the president actually enters the legislative chamber. There's a separation of powers in America. The executive branch sits in the White House and don't usually come into the legislature. One of the few but large differences between the American-inspired republic and its progenitor who created it, the British Westminster system. So in the Canadian system, for example, Justin Trudeau is just a congressman. He just sits in Congress, but he's the best congressman, they say, the prime minister, right? So it's a slightly different. And what we saw, so I did not, just so everyone knows, I'm going to be talking about the State of the Union today. I never watched it. I did not watch it. It's stupid. I'm not going to watch anything like that lasts that long. So, but the good news is I'm not talking about anything in the speech, really. What I'm talking about today is what wasn't in the speech, because that's actually what's relevant. And it's relevant in a few ways. It's relevant from the point of view of the simulation I thought of right away. We got this guy, Joe Biden. How did the simulation deliver us a president whose name fits so well with biding time, Biden time? When I heard all the things he didn't put in the speech, I basically saw the cocktail to win World War III and to usher in an era of hyper-Bitcoinization. So the good news is what wasn't in the speech seems like it's not in the perception, not in the vision of the White House and the executive branch or the legislative branch. And it looks like we might still have a clear field in order to develop this stuff. So I'll get into what wasn't in the speech. It's really important. And not only what wasn't in the speech and those things that have a clear field, each of the things in the clear field, I'm going to argue today, has a solution within Bitcoin where the forces of Bitcoin can actually be unleashed to solve these problems. And we're going to go over it. The theory that you need to understand first is an idea called crypto economics. I know a lot of Bitcoiners might be turned off by the word crypto in there. This has nothing to do with cryptocurrencies per se or other cryptocurrencies. Crypto economics is an idea that is actually not, so here we go, crypto economics. It is not a subcategory of economics. It's just economics like you understand. It's choices. Yes, no, do I do this? Don't I do that? What it is a subcategory of, so it's not a subcategory special version of new fancy words invented to confuse the listener. It's not that. It's not a special bespoke type of economics, just economics. It's a subcategory of engineering. It's a subcategory of system design, how you design systems, the choices that go into systems that actually don't have a company behind them or a promoter or a marketer. It's almost like the forces that make the actual organism grow. And we didn't really know how to measure, or probably couldn't measure, any of these forces for real until Bitcoin. Bitcoin is really the first ever full expression of a crypto economic system being self-perpetuating by the people who use it. The system that Bitcoin uses for self-perpetuation, just briefly in case you need it recounted here, is that we've got social, people talk about it. What is Bitcoin? It's relevant as sensor proof money. It's relevant as corporate balance sheet. It's relevant for privacy. It's relevant for all these different things, but you get more and more people chatting about it, hedge against inflation, all these different things. And there's always more chatter. And that's helped feed the mining supplies, the people who run the nodes and the people who actually perpetuate the network from a technical point of view. And then their work, of course, leads to more speculation because there's a market and people want to trade it for services and goods or just for other forms of money. So in the end, this cycle grows. I actually helped build a tool once to index other cryptocurrencies based on their relative value to Bitcoin or relative performance to Bitcoin. It was a failed product, it didn't work. But the basic idea was we could take Bitcoin a little bit like how we use water in the metric system. So water arbitrarily just became the measurement for the properties of water, became the measurement for the metric system by saying, okay, well, it freezes at that point, that's 0, and then it boils at this point, we're going to make that 100, and then we're going to divide that into equal parts, and then we're going to make the volume of that 1 liter to be equal to or measured by the consistency and density of water and how much space it takes up. So everything was based on water. So my idea is you could take Bitcoin and actually measure any other crypto network against it by how many people are exchanging it, how many trade pairs, what's the volume, how many people are mining, what's the overall hash rate, how many people are chatting about it on different fields. You could basically make a measuring stick relative to each coin based on what Bitcoin was doing, because we knew we had crypto economic forces. So all this to say, crypto economics, all you need to remember is that it's not a subcategory of economics. It's a subcategory of engineering. And the engineering that's relevant here is the types of systems that can grow based on the incentives in the model. So what I'm arguing today is that everything that was not in the State of the Union can actually be solved by system design and extend the P2P psychology behind Bitcoin to all of these solutions that will really get us somewhere. So first, in Biden time, it looks like, according to Sagar and Jetty, I don't know how to pronounce his name exactly. I've been listening to him for years. So I actually don't know how to pronounce his name. He's got one of the most important podcasts going right now. He used to work for The Hill, which is a Washington, D.C. inside baseball, inside politics magazine show or whatever. But he's really gotten a lot better in the past couple of years, frankly. He had a sort of buttoned up version of the show before, and I didn't really watch it. Now I think he's a real person saying things that are personal to him and from his own insight. And I think he's way better this way. And so Sagar came out and said in one of his tweets, nuclear energy is the most pragmatic and important part of any clean energy program and is absent from the text of Biden's speech. Michael Schellenberger, who I've brought up on the show quite a few times, Michael Schellenberger, who I think is actually partly responsible for getting the needle really moved on nuclear energy in America and accepted in a bipartisan way. And Michael Schellenberg, writing on Barry Weiss's Substack. So Barry Weiss was a huge New York Times writer and sort of defected. It was like a political defection and went to Substack and gets a lot of derision for it. And so Barry Weiss let Michael Schellenberger write on her Substack today because her audience is large. And the title of his article was "The West's Green Delusions Empowered Putin." And the exact quote that I liked was this: Putin's invasion of Ukraine was a wake-up call. Biden pulled back from apocalyptic climate rhetoric last night in his speech, but not from inflationary energy policies. It's time for the West to put energy production on wartime footing and break from the anti-energy policies that empowered Putin. So are they going to do that? Are they going to embrace nuclear energy and from here go forward and sink everything that's going on for energy needs and all the leverage that Putin and Russia have over Europe right now and Germany? Is that likely going to happen? Well, we don't know. What we do know is that the crypto economic forces in system design can actually help Bitcoin privately build this stuff and use that sort of energy, that innovation thrust behind it to sort of perpetuate an entire market. I have a science fiction book where I actually used Bitcoin mining as the foundation for free cities, particularly in the Sahara Desert, where Bitcoin miners would buy their own nuclear reactor, a small modular nuclear reactor, and use it to both terraform the desert so that those citadel people could live there. All you'd need to actually terraform the desert, I don't know if you know this, is cows and their poo and water. So if you had a nuclear reactor that could pump the water and filter it, they'd have the energy from the nuclear reactor, and you can actually use the diet, which you would have to bring all that keto carnivorous beef, and you could actually, with those two things, turn the Sahara Desert green. And there are parts of the Sahara where you don't have to ask any Joe Biden or there's no country. The Western Sahara Peace is a disputed land between Morocco and Mauritania, and there's no one to ask permission to. You could just put a nuclear reactor there and go. I don't think you'd have to really trouble yourself too much about it. And Bitcoiners can start doing this because some of these small modular nuclear reactors are not limited to where there's population centers. You could start going in the north, you can go to the Arctic, you can go to anywhere where there aren't people and put one of these down and actually start a new city. And if America is not going to solve energy problems, and if these countries, big countries, keep fighting over the large supplies of fossil fuels and the pipelines that are needed to refine them and transport them, and the refineries that are needed, all that infrastructure, if it continues to be caught up in war games, well, Bitcoiners can actually go smaller and proliferate this industry, because it's my prediction again that Bitcoin miners will be the largest private buyers of small modular nuclear reactors in the world, and will help usher in a whole era of this. So, both from the financing point of view, Bitcoiners already know how to finance mining rigs as it is. This is just basically a super complicated mining rig. You're just adding an energy component. But the financing of these things are getting more and more sophisticated. Hundreds of millions of dollars going into this regularly now to start and launch huge mining operations. So it's not a new thing. So system design, you could basically, with Bitcoin, create an incentive structure that actually solves the nuclear energy problem. And we're probably not going to have to wait for Biden. And the longer they don't bother with this stuff, maybe the better. For Bitcoin anyway, maybe not for everybody else. The next one, this one's kind of what was in the speech. It's on security. What I really mean is police. So one thing that he did say, the president, yesterday, and MSNBC picked up on this, was we should all agree, this is a quote from the speech last night, we should all agree the answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund the police. Fund them with resources and training. Resources and training they need to protect their communities. But this is the party. If you have memory hold it, some people memory hole stuff that was big. If you remember 2 years ago, it was the opposite of defund the police. And I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and a lot happened around defund the police. It was totally the opposite of what I heard last night. And that makes me think that the vulnerability that people have to this kind of memory holing and topsy-turviness actually creates a security issue, not about the police. And I continue to personally support defund the police as a challenge and a way for us to change how we run cities and organize them. I think the answer could be within the private sector, could be within technology, could be within cameras and drones and all kinds of stuff. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I know there are answers. Even with DNA, it looks like with DNA analysis right now, you get caught in crimes. There's so much DNA out there, and we know how to get it within a couple of generations. So they don't even need DNA of a person who committed the crime specifically to corroborate it. If any one of that criminal's family members have ever sent something to DNA.com or Ancestry.com, a couple of generations away and you can find the person now. They've gotten that sophisticated in DNA analysis. Crime might actually be totally solved because of the DNA analysis. We might even need these cameras and all that stuff. So we'll see. There's still an argument, a technological argument to be made for defund the police, but that's not what I'm talking about for security. What I'm talking about for security is the dangers that arise from this kind of memory holing and from being able to forget something that was mantra 2 years ago. What, did everything with Black Lives Matter just get solved? Do we not have any troubles anymore? I guess it's all okay now and we can fund the police again because everyone's getting along? Is that the conclusion? And I don't mean to be playful about something that's really serious, because is anyone asking the question? I think a lot of people did a lot of soul searching around that time and made a lot of commitments to seeing a different interaction in urban environments, and to see it abandoned like this and turned around, I think is confusing for a lot of people, and I think makes them angry, and I think in the end decreases trust, as if you could decrease it anymore, trust in the media. And it gets even worse. We've got this guy Jacob Reyes in PolitiFact. He fact-checked all this debate about energy policy, and is America weak versus Russia? It's going on. How did we allow Russia to have so much leverage in energy? And why did the Biden administration increase oil imports from Russia over the past year? So Jacob Reyes for PolitiFact fact checks that the US didn't double oil imports from Russia in the past year. That's false on the meter, it said. But then if you go down and you say, when they clarify and explain it all, the US did double the amount of crude oil imported from Russia. Okay, so they did double the amount of crude oil, but not oil. Damn, they got him. Trick question, I guess. I guess the media is just a trick question if it's about war, right? Ah, you got me, you bugger. Gotcha journalism at its best. And all of this makes me think that with another subject that was not brought up yesterday by Biden, which is how are you going to pay for all these unintelligent journalists that will lose their jobs once this whole market goes to heck, which we can start predicting is kind of possible. Right? In Canada anyway, they're completely subsidized. The media companies, the newspapers, everything is completely subsidized. They have no capacity to survive on their own at all. And it makes me think that I also didn't hear about UBI last night. Now, I know a lot of Bitcoiners might have a problem with UBI, and they might hear UBI and say, ah, that's a communist thing, that's a socialist thing. Forget about for a second where the money's coming from, because that is an issue and you got to figure it out. But I challenge Bitcoiners to reframe UBI as a better, listen to this, UBI. This is an important reframe for all Bitcoiners to embrace UBI. Think of UBI as the prison, as the jail, as the incentive trap that all the people who can't survive the transition from fiat credentialism to the Bitcoin standard, that's their punishment. That's their punishment in the end. And it's a you choose it, you just say, I'm going to go on this UBI. It is for people who can't adapt to the modern world too. It should be seen as sympathetic. I think Bitcoiners have a role to offer a solution, or a responsibility anyway, to offer a solution to everyone in society if we're going to have the ability to perpetuate a future and build a future. We can't just say, those all the people that are not smart enough are self-custody Bitcoin and figure it out. So, but there's two categories I'm talking about here. We got to make sure we take care of everyone for the betterment of society. We have to make sure that everyone is fed, everyone is healthy, everyone has equal opportunities to strategies, equal access to strategies that can make them successful in life. But there are other people who, I mean, this Jacob Reyes guy who just wrote this crazy thing about oil. I mean, can you hire this guy as a writer in the future? Can you hire anyone who will forget about defund the police to fund the police again? Anyone who did that, I mean, can you actually ever hire them as a writer? Because in the end, that's what you got to understand, I think anyway, that's happening with a lot of these media companies, is that these are writers who might not be able to make it on their own. They might be afraid about losing their job. They might be incentivized to get their paycheck. I don't want to mind read too much, but everyone's motivated by a certain amount of fear, losing, and all that kind of stuff. And what I wonder is if we couldn't just create this UBI system, you can self-select and go in it, you can take it. But for those people, so, when all this is over and we're dealing with the central bankers and the liars and the cheaters and the frauds, and what are we going to do with them? And people say, oh, Nuremberg too. What are we going to execute these people? Come on. The better plan is to put them in a UBI trap, and then here's the incentive model. I would watch a show where Jerome Powell is sort of disincentivized to get off his butt and get like a job at McDonald's or something for a couple of days so he can go golfing. Maybe something bonus, something extra that he might like to do again. Otherwise, you give him enough money to just survive. But if he wants to, and then you can get people, just independent people that could go record him and say like, Jerome, you want a job? You want to go somewhere? And then Jerome Powell will try and go, and then maybe he can go on, like, I don't know, I'm just guessing he likes golf. I don't know, it could be anything, right? I don't know what Jerome Powell likes, but maybe it's one of those little things that he used to get access to in a privileged way. But what are these people going to do when the whole thing gets collapsed? They have no skills, no abilities. Jerome Powell's a lawyer. I mean, maybe he'd be okay, but a lot of these writers won't be okay. They're not going to make it. And the ones who are really deceptive, it would be cool to put them in a UBI trap and see what happens. Who knows, right? See what happens. The next one, and this is, so one of the neat things that happens with the State of the Union is there's an rebuttal from the other party. So in this case, we have the Democrat presidents. So after the State of the Union, the Republican Party will nominate a person to give the rebuttal. It's usually a person they want to give attention to and spotlight to and see how it goes. In this case, we got the Iowa governor, Kim Reynolds, and she picked up on a piece that Biden did not pick up on, which is the education system in America. And she's a huge charter school proponent. And she said, keeping schools open is only the start of a pro-parent, pro-family revolution that Republicans are leading in Iowa and other states. Now, she says Republicans, it's not exactly that. The same groups for Black Lives Matter that were for defund the police are overwhelmingly part of charter school support. Overwhelmingly, it is openly supported by Black Lives Matter. And my personal overlap with Black Lives Matter is absolutely on the freedom to education and freedom of choice in education. And I personally believe that the education system is a huge example of systemic racism, and charter schools are a way out. As someone who lived in Brooklyn and saw the success firsthand of charter schools every day in the parks where my children played, I can attest to, anecdotally anyway, them being just a great thing. We also had a Texas primary vote yesterday, Prop 9. So there was some elections yesterday, and these will determine candidates for the election in November. And in Texas, biggest state, 88% voted for funding that follows students, not systems. 88%. So it looks like Texas is going full charter and money will go with the students. So it looks like that's going to happen. How does it relate to Bitcoin? For me, you see a lot of Bitcoiners embracing this already. And a lot of Bitcoiners have definitely years ago already pulled their kids out of public school systems, not necessarily embracing the credentialed private school systems, choosing surf beaches, pods, basically old school style stuff. And you can start imagining that a lot of these writers who aren't insane, like the ones that say that oil wasn't double, but it was double, or defund the police, but I remembered saying fund the police, or was it defund the police or whatever. So not those journalists, right? There are good ones out there too. If there are no publications, what do? I see a huge private market in education and the ability for people to go out and start up schools with just a few students and turn these coupons that the government will give you as the students follow, as the money follows the students, and you create one of these incentive systems again, because you make the teacher, the parent, the actual customer. And I want to ask you this, Chris, and don't check now, we don't have to interrupt this show, but we did one on education markets. We did a breakup show on education markets. It might have been censored. I saw it removed and I couldn't see it. I might have just been in a different country and whatever, but let's check. Maybe it was just indexed improperly, but I am curious because that was a show we did just on education markets, charting the progression of making teachers, parents, the clients, the customers in the system, and it seems to be gone. So we'll see. The next one we had here is border security. Not a word of it, not a word of the American border in the speech last night, I'm told. And so what's going on there? Is it all solved? Well, it might be. Samson Mow quit Blockstream. Samson Mow was a major voice of a major company in Bitcoin, one that sent satellites up in the air so that we would have apocalyptic coverage for Bitcoin, and also the fella behind the Bitcoin bond in El Salvador. They also do the data feed to the New York Stock Exchange for Bitcoin, and they also employ several core devs. They're actually from my home city, Montreal. A lot of people don't know that. I've met a lot of the team because I thought it was just like a local startup years ago, and it turned out to be Blockstream. Funny. but this, and this was when I just started. I was like, this guy starting up a Bitcoin company is in my town. And I said, okay, well, I'll go meet them, you know, and it turned out to be a real thing. So pretty neat stuff. So Samson Mao has quit Blockstream and he's going to be orange pilling nation states. That's his new job. Pretty cool job. His first country, is it Mexico? Is he going to Mexico first? We don't know. We're going to find out. But if he goes to Mexico, and Mexico joins, we got to start asking ourselves a few questions. Really important questions, big for Bitcoin, really important for Bitcoin, and not one of these ones where we have an open field to play. This might be one where we got to move quicker, because in the news today as well, Mexico will not sanction Russia. They will not sanction Russia. How come? Could be the money. I've always believed that the Mexican cartels are heavily integrated with the Chinese drug machine, pharmaceutical companies, right? The fentanyl and all this stuff. And they're a supplier, right? China's always long been a supplier of the primary products that you require in order to make a lot of these drugs. And Mexico can either ride shotgun, not even Mexico, Latin America can either ride shotgun with Bitcoiners to win World War III, like El Salvador, like these other countries that have an experience with failed monetary policies and already see the benefit of the off-the-shelf monetary policy that Bitcoin offers. But if they don't ride shotgun with us, Bitcoiners, are they on Xi's team? I don't know. I don't know. But I know on that one, we can't mess around. That's not Biden time on that one. We got to move. And we got to make sure Mexico is on our side. And it doesn't matter about the politicians necessarily. Enough of the country, enough of the people, enough of the institutions. And it looks like Samson's on his way. One of the richest people in Mexico. Looks like he's on our team. It's a good start. We need more. And it doesn't mean the cartels won't be on our side too. My understanding is they have a lot of cash. And that cash ain't going to work for them. So maybe there's something going on there. We'll see. And finally, and this is just a weird one. Nothing really about China. Nothing really about China last night, right? And that makes me wonder, why was there nothing about China? Well, a lot of attention on Ukraine and Russia. And let's put that in context again. So it looks like Russia's physical war is not going very well. Fog of war, I don't know the answers. I'm not going to analyze them. Let's just say it's not going well. Okay, well, what really happened then? What really just happened? Were they just that pitiful in planning a war? Maybe, maybe. But the other thing, the SWIFT and the financial system and the being kicked off. Now, if they'd have asked to get off, if China, Russia, Pakistan, all these places that have wheat and oil deals would have asked to be off the US system, it would have been seen as an act of war. But now they got kicked off. It's no fault of their own, and they're all free to go and do this deal. They've gotten some Biden time here, right? And there's a lot that can happen. My prediction is Russia might just back up out of Ukraine because the objectives of the war were already met. That's just one scenario. I'm not sure that's real, but I'm starting to see it more and more like that. That the real point of the war was to get out of the petrodollar and to go exist in this realm without the same repercussions. I could be wrong. Russia, the sanctions could be so crippling that it is going to be, smashed into the dark ages. China might turn their back on them. I don't know any of the answers to that, none of them. But I see a scenario to me that makes sense where the point was to get out of the network and now have these separate side deals and to have competing systems. If that was the objective of the war for Russia, they won, whatever is going on right now. If it really was to take Kiev and this land war and all that, well, then looks like they got some trouble and who knows what to think, but it doesn't look like they thought this thing out very well. But we didn't hear about China's role in any of this. We hear China's negotiating for peace right now between Ukraine and Russia. I think they'll be successful. That's just my prediction. If China is successful at bringing them to peace, you can start checking my theory about this being about getting out of the system again, because it might be the actual way to frame this and understand this. But so that's it. What wasn't in the speech today, what Bitcoin can do from a system design point of view, from a systems point of view, how these systems can actually get better, using Bitcoin, and why we might have, because they're not paying attention to this, been given a little more time to solve this stuff, except for the China piece.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that, Nolan. I personally have a couple of maybe points to add and questions to go over with you. I don't know if you actually saw, I believe it was today, Samson actually sent a tweet out in a thread below when he announced that he is leaving to consult nation states, that Mexico is on the short list of one of these companies. I mean, I'm here in Mexico right now, and you put Mexico on a Bitcoin standard, I'm never leaving. But it is definitely very interesting to see. I mean, look, in my conversations with people here, we talk about how bad it got in America in certain parts for certain businesses, but you look at the dollar versus the peso over the last few years, and they got absolutely demolished. How far my dollar goes on certain things kind of blows my mind at times, to stop and realize just like what this country is really dealing with. And I think to your point too about them maybe not aligning or not sanctioning Russia. One thing that I was reading a thread by Mark Moss that he pointed out, and actually read an article last night that very astutely pointed out Russia is not allowed in any meetings. They've been scolded and are being reprimanded by every agency, by almost everyone in the world, but they're not kicked out of the OPEC plus meetings. They're sitting right there. And it is really, this entire sanction is skirting around the fact that Russia's dominance in the oil and energy markets gives them this leverage to behave the way they are behaving. And rather than the world banding together and figuring out a way to take this leverage out of their hands, they're literally just circling laps. So I guess my question to you would just be sort of what do you think it's going to take for the world to shift that stance and start attacking Russian oil and Russian energy reserves?
I think it's what Schellenberger said. It's a war footing for energy. I think you have to take away you got to take away the feelings around a lot of this stuff. You got to take away the emotions around energy. And we've been ratcheted up for so many years now. It's almost like a mask. It's the same as the mask world, but it's energy, right? It's like you virtue signal with a mask to show. Now I get why you want to virtue signal with a mask, to show that it's not your fear, but your neighbor might be afraid, so you're willing to help them. I get the psychology of why people wore masks in the early days, and why people would be a proponent of wearing masks. And energy was not that different. There was stylish energy, there was cool energy, there was fashionable energy, and there was unfashionable energy. And what the hell are people talking about? It's energy, you know? The thing that makes oil beautiful is that I can put it in a jug, and it doesn't matter where I am. It's as useful to me anywhere on the planet. And that just isn't the truth about everything else. And people weren't willing to accept that. And I think the answers are there. I do believe energy is just an engineering problem now. It's not a science problem. We don't need any more breakthroughs for energy. We don't need any more. It's not like we're waiting on, it's not like these quantum computer morons and all their, when the quantum comes, we're all going to be, the science breakthroughs that have to happen there, right? That's not engineering. That's not engineering. That's science. It's another breakthrough, right? Now, I don't want to downplay quantum computing. I don't understand enough of it. I wrote a science fiction book about it, but I understand a little bit. The reality is I was free in a science fiction book about quantum computing and AI to be creative, because so much of it is literally science fiction, and the science isn't even there yet, so you can invent it. In the case of energy, when it comes to battery storage, they already handed out the Nobel Prizes for graphene, for carbon nanotubes, for all of the energy storage stuff. They figured it out. The stuff that's in stained glass, those beautiful things that are in the stained glass, are crude nanotech. We didn't even realize we were making it those hundreds of years ago. It turns out that we can create these structures that will store supercapacitors and everything much better than lithium ion. Lithium ion is garbage compared to these things. It just hasn't scaled. It's all the same things we knew about in early Bitcoin. How do you scale it? What do you do? Innovator's dilemma. Oil companies have too much money. Frankly, part of my route into Bitcoin was from that energy thing, because I was so curious about these batteries, and I knew right away that we couldn't fund any of this and that we would just be bought out. And I said, well, you need funding mechanisms. What is this accredited investor stuff? You mean I can't buy Bitcoin? What the fuck, right? Like, you know, it was all that. And so that's how I got into it. I think now we're there. I think that by putting a battery in every person's pocket, that the technology behind the phone is quickly meeting the technology that drives cars. And it's basically a race between the thing on your phone and the tech behind the cars. The truth is the car industry will collapse when this happens. Everybody knows this. Morgan Stanley last year said when electric cars come, they're going to be priced around $4,000, $5,000 maybe. Far fewer parts, far few, it's not even close. You can't, the complexity of a combustion engine vehicle is a different order of magnitude than an electric car. Even Elon Musk knows that. Even he knows that it's got to be about the style, the perfection. He's got to sell a high-end, and even for the high-end automobiles he's offering, we already see they're pretty cheap relative to what you're getting. I mean, you can get that Model 3 or whatever that thing is for, it's a Toyota, right? It's not even.
Yeah, with the tax credits, you're getting something.
Forget about the tax credits. I mean, the actual building of the thing, right? Forget about the tax credits for a second. For even just buying it, you don't need them. He'll even get it cheaper. It's just far fewer parts. Think about all the parts you need to put in a combustion engine to keep the head gasket intact, to keep the coolant system running, to keep the oil system running. Combustion's a hell of a force to move a car. I love combustion. Like I said, oil is good for you anywhere. Nothing beats a good explosion, right? But you can only use it for so many things. I'm on a little island. Do I need multiple explosions per second to drive down the road? No, I need a battery. Like, I don't need steel and all that stuff. So, so in my mind, we're going to see Mexico embrace this energy stuff before anyone, because they need it, you know. So hopefully they don't get pulled in by the other guys.
No, I mean, you also brought up an excellent point at the very beginning, both about the idea of having miners operate with sort of mini nuclear power plants, as well as the idea that we may not necessarily need to see the next breakthrough as far as what type of energy we're creating, but rather how we're spreading that energy. And that is our biggest problem. We have all of this wind power down in Southern California that can't even get sent out beyond our borders, because that's just the way, unfortunately, we have the system designed as far as what is available and how we share and send energy from one place to the next. And I think iterating that better and more efficiently will lead to cleaner energy in the long run. I do want to ask you on the nuclear stuff. I also agree. I think nuclear and revisiting that is sort of the next iteration of what humanity looks like. However, of course, there is always that stigma, especially with Chernobyl and everything that has happened on the worst case scenario. We have witnessed that. How do we either educate people, educate the legislators who are making these decisions? What steps do you want to see taken in order to help us get there? Because I think we are a few hurdles away from a world where people can have their own mini nuclear power plant.
No, we're not. No. So the hurdles are past. So America, I believe, personally, don't have intel on this, but I'm going to do a slight bit of mind reading here, slight bit. Basically the petrodollar could not put up with widespread nuclear power. That's why France is sort of always been on the side of this deal. Japan had to embrace nuclear power as well, and were able to. But those are the two principal nuclear powers, both of which have a different relationship with America than almost everyone else in the world. We're talking about two of the larger economies. And in France's case, not just a large economy, a non-NATO military power unto its own, with its own navy, with its own, they don't buy Lockheed Martin F-35s, they have the Rafale, they have their own jets, they have their own stuff, their own infrastructure, their own military industrial complex, if you will. And when the Australian deal fell apart for the submarines, so France was supposed to sell submarines to Australia, and then America came in and kiboshed it and gave them to Australia, and France was all angry. Oh, what are you gonna? What I saw was America saying to Australia, well, how are they going to get there? Because we're not Like, remember how we used to protect them and everybody, and all the seas were good and everyone can go wherever they wanted? We're not doing that. So they sold you some stuff, but you got to drive it and they got to get it to you, right? What are they going to do? So that killed the deal. The first thing Macron did internationally after is say, we're going to build so many nuclear reactors, you have no idea. We're going to put them everywhere. If we find a corner that doesn't have a nuclear reactor, we're going to put it there and we're going to get the energy. To me, that was okay, America. Now, this is the mind reading part. I don't know. That's what I saw. I saw them happen at the same time. You can go Google it or check or whatever and see, anyone out there can check it for themselves. Maybe I'm wrong. Please tell me if I am. I saw them at the same time. The other piece is, speaking of military industrial machines, Rolls-Royce, way ahead on this. Rolls-Royce has been promoting their small modular nuclear reactor for well over a year, looking for private buyers. And they exist and admitted that the number of states and cities out there aren't enough. They can build more because this is a factory built, shipped to your location nuclear reactor. And so that part's already done. Now, the reason why these factory built nuclear reactors are en vogue is because they're all Gen 3. And the point of Gen 3 is the nuclear meltdown stuff is engineered away. It's an engineering problem again. Nuclear security was not a science problem, it was an engineering problem. And it looks like they engineered it away. One of the models, for example, that we build in Canada is called the pebble bed reactor, which are like those little sprinkle donuts that you see in, whatever the little, but all it is a carbon ball. And then the isotopes themselves, the uranium, are not the rods that you would use to boil water. It's little sprinkles. And so if they boil down, they burn down, they just burn into the thing and that's the end of it. And it can't create the burn into the ground forever like we have in Fukushima in Japan. So I think it's already happening. So I don't think we need to go out and convince every single person. I think the bureaucratic lag is the issue. And that's why I've been a proponent of this person they've put in charge in the American system. I can't remember their name. Everyone was laughing at this person because they're a trans. And they said it's not serious for American energy policy because Biden put this trans person in charge. And what I've been saying is, I don't know anything about this person, nothing about their ideas or beliefs. They're now director or nominated as a director for nuclear waste management. This is a person we need to trust, right? This is a person we need we have to trust this person. And because this person shared more about their private life, we're supposed to think that they're crazy because they've chained up some grown men as dogs or something. The truth is, we're going to have to find out more about this stuff about anyone in these positions of power. It'll become so normal that we find out that there are transvestite people in positions of power that it won't even make news anymore. So I don't know anything about this person. All I know is that this person who volunteered information about their private life, I didn't take it as like, look at me, I'm cool and kinky. I said, I need to create a transparency, space here so that I can do my job, which is complicated and difficult. And all I want is for this person to actually do their job, as in, let's process more nuclear waste and have smarter plans to deal with it. I don't care about the lipstick and the dresses and all that stuff. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a good thing because now we know this person. And if it turns out they didn't do anything in their job, get them on that. Now we know this person. This person, if they don't do their job, should become a symbol for incompetence. Incompetence, not for the clothes and the lipstick and the dog stuff. Nobody cares. Literally nobody cares. If you're getting jacked and angry about that, you gotta look in the mirror. You got a lot of things going on. Get jacked and angry if no one's processing nuclear waste because we're not actually even producing any because we're too stupid, right? That's what we don't want. We don't want to be too stupid that we don't have energy and we're worried about someone's lipstick and their pronouns.
Yeah, I mean, I think for better or worse, I'm going to say something kind of direct, but there's this weird, uncomfortable idea that people have to get canceled. I fucking hate it. I hate cancel culture. However, both sides are guilty of this.
Oh, that's why I brought it up this way. You're totally true. This is the right-wing people not shutting up about pronouns.
Like enough. Everyone just needs to shut up.
Now, I want to do
Everyone
my
needs to
best.
shut up.
Yeah, I agree. I'll do my best with this person to use the right pronoun. I might call they a he by accident. I might. I hope I get forgiveness for that. That it could go too far the other way. But I just want to see this person process some motherfucking nuclear waste. Process that shit. Get it out of here and show that you can do more. And if you don't do that, I'm glad you're famous now. I'm glad. That's good news that this
What is the
person-
first? What is the first thing? What is the next thing that you would like to see the U.S. do in regards to nuclear energy?
one nuclear reactor. They haven't permitted a new one in 45 years. They created it's so close to being an NPC. It's the Nuclear Regulatory Commission or something, NRC, so close to NPC. It would have been perfect if it was the NPC. Damn, simulation didn't give it to us. Biden time, it did a lot of good stuff for us, but it just wouldn't give us the NPC for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But it
That's
turns
on
out,
the previous simulation.
yeah, the previous one ran that program. They didn't like it. They caught on too quickly.
It led to the real World War III that ended humanity. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
trying to fix this.
Yeah, it's trying to fix it in this version. So just since they created this bureaucracy, however many years ago, how many nuclear reactors have been built in America? Sweet, fuck all. And if we're going to lose World War III, this is why. Because there's one energy source you need in space. There's only one that works. We're not going to light a fucking fire up there. There's no wind power. You know, I guess
oxygen,
solar,
yeah.
but I don't know. Does it work in space, like a big panel or something? Like,
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. Like there's no oxygen, so you can't have fire. You can't really
No,
create
it's
combustion. At a
And-
certain point, if we're going further away from the sun, that energy is decreasing, and you're not guaranteeing that we're going to find a new sun or source of that.
and even on the Russia-China piece, I mean, that's kind of why I suspect something beyond the tanks and the Kiev thing is important, because I've seen these weapons those Americans sent them, the tank buster thing that can get you from 4,000 kilometers away. And you're telling me there's a 40-mile convoy of trucks and no one used one of these things? I mean, it would be a game, right? So it's all fake. And who knows what's going on over there, but tanks aren't part of war anymore. They're stupid. How long would a tank battle last in modern war? 25 seconds, 30 seconds, a real one. Like if NATO went tomorrow and said, I'm done with these Russian tanks, how long? I mean, if they had to time it, it would be the time to get their space weapons onto them and shoot them down. That it would be however long it takes for a rocket to come from space to the ground. That's the amount of time it would take. And every tank in the world is finished. They're all done. There's no more. There's no more tanks. It would be that quick.
I mean,
So
war is just a video game now.
It's a video game.
Too many people sitting in a
space one is
cubicle
not.
somewhere else.
But the space one is not. The space one is not. Because if
Yeah.
you're in space and you're cleaning up satellites, guess what happened to the goddamn video games? Right? There are no more video games. then the game is over.
Yeah,
No Pokemon
I will
Go,
challenge you on that, where I could see a world where they're going to prioritize sending more machines than men into space for cost purposes. It'll just end up being cheaper. But
Yeah,
also,
but-
like you're crazy if you don't think.
But I don't
I
mean
applied
I
to
don't
being
I don't
one of
mean
the first
humans
people to
fighting
go
in
to
space.
Mars.
I mean the higher ground.
No,
right?
I know this is
Go on the
based on
higher
a
ground.
conversation we had a couple of days ago. I mean, look, we are at that culminating point, I think, in our society, and I don't mean to exaggerate what life has been like, especially over the last 2 years, but the world is one bad, angry message, one bad mood, bad decision, wrong button pressed away from like global catastrophe.
Yeah. So one of the cool things, I guess, about where I'm from originally in Quebec is I think with the energy infrastructure that's there, 10 people could keep it running. It's just gravity. It's just the greatest hydro resource the world has ever known, and it's not even close. Quebec is Texas. They're almost the same idea, except one was made by Protestants and one was made by Catholics. But they remain the two sub-federal states in Canada and the United States with the most nationalistic ideas. So it's the two sub-federal states where the state flag is more popular than the federal flag as you go about it. And they both share the other piece in common, which is they have so much energy that they're a little dumb because it doesn't matter, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, whatever happens, we're rich, we're good. And in Quebec's case, even more so in this apocalyptic scenario, because I mean, giants built this stuff in the end, right? You couldn't build it again. It's like 30-mile long dams built in the north that will just all the water. So Quebec is my whole life. I've only ever lived off of totally 100% renewable energy. I've not known any other environment as a kid growing up. There's no gas, oil, nothing. We have nothing else. It's just hydro. And because of that, you could keep it right. It's pretty simple too. You know, just have to keep the substations running and the lines up and all that. It's pretty simple. But what we need to happen, and this is why we call it the breakup, and why what you were saying, this critical moment, you know, Bitcoiners have to stop thinking, Bitcoin miners, the big ones, stop thinking about your energy bill. Own the energy, just own it. Just own it, buy it, go buy them now. Use your financing arm, go call Rolls-Royce, buy a nuclear reactor, put it in the desert, put it in the Arctic, put it wherever you want. You don't need people. You don't need any people. The people will move there in the end. It'll become a beacon to create a citadel or a city or a reason and all that. My personal preference is to go in the desert and terraform and use it. A little bit of that nuclear reactor can be used for desalination, a little bit for your electrical needs, and the rest goes to the Bitcoin. And you pump, you go.
I love that. I love that. And I have to bring this to people's attention. I just sent this tweet out in our internal chat, and I'm going to post it in the YouTube chat as well. Ray Paxful making a bold prediction that Russia will be the second country to make Bitcoin legal tender. We're seeing a lot of news out of their finance ministry as well about potentially seeing gold as an alternative to USD. Like, we are in the 11th hour of the simulation, and it is happening in real time, guys. I'm sending it now in the YouTube chat as well. I sent it in the YouTube chat as well. So I would definitely recommend everyone take the time to read what Ray is saying about this. It's very interesting. I mean, his take on it. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Nolan, on just the idea of the second country if Russia is the second country to make Bitcoin legal tender, what effect that has on the global markets. Because if it turns into Russia, Mexico, China, all linking up together, Iran as well, all in their own team, and they have all also adopted Bitcoin, what does that mean for Bitcoin at large in your mind?
We have no more Biden time. It's over. We're out of time. We got to do it. At that point, it's you're in. It's the I guess it was Winston Churchill. The only way through hell is to just keep going. I think we're at that.
Why stop in hell, man?
Yeah,
Why stop in hell?
I think we're at that. That's my prediction. Whether it's Russia, look, one of my first shows, the price was dipping. We were talking about it was depressing. It was going down to Bitcoin was dipping into $30,000 range, and what's his name? Bukele went from El Salvador to meet in Turkey, and if you remember, that was fog of war. And at the time, Putin was going to ban crypto. That was the rumor that led to that sell-off. And I came on the show and everyone, oh, it's going to be banned in Russia. And I said, well, no. We as Bitcoiners asked to be on the big kid table with all of the big macro assets. Well, guess what? In this world of manipulation, we're getting manipulated. They're not manipulating the protocol. It's not a 51% attack. But it's an attack nevertheless. It's a manipulation of the commodity itself, not the block space commodity, not the network, but a manipulation of the price. And of course, they're manipulating it. They have so much money that they can manipulate everything in that world. Now, we've been talking a lot about radioactivity. They're playing with radioactive fire, because if you get burned, it's over. I think they can control it, maybe, or at least continue to manipulate it for their own purposes. Or maybe everyone's just accepted the truth that money and state have to be separated and there's no other way forward. Maybe that's just it, but I don't know. I know that we, in my years with CoinDesk, we appealed to Putin directly on a number of occasions to his office, and just tried to get him on the record for an interview. That was it. And we always said, we know you understand about cryptography. We know what business you come from. Please give us some insight from, we know you know. We know you know. We don't think you don't know. So tell us what you know. And of course, it never went anywhere. But we tried nevertheless as a media company to get an interview and frame it and flatter him to get, perhaps good treatment or access. And it never happened, obviously. He too small potatoes at the time, but I convinced myself he understood what was going on. So whether I'm right or not, I don't know. I just know I convinced myself as I wrote these letters to him to try to get his attention that I told him he knew what he was talking about. So
I'm going to say
it
something.
looks like he does. The time he said it's impossible for a country to create a cryptocurrency, you have to admit his answer was 100% correct, right? When he said impossible, because by their nature, they are not state issued.
No,
the only smart answer I've ever heard.
he had, and you're absolutely right. He had the best answer as far as what a real cryptocurrency can look like. And I don't think any other things that introduce US dollar coin, none of that stuff is a real cryptocurrency. There's, in my opinion, excuse me, only one real cryptocurrency. Dude, these tortas and tacos, I love them, but like, oh my God, my body is not appreciating them.
They have them in Miami too, though. They'll be good.
Dude. But like, I'm telling you guys, like, I can't stop eating all the street food here in Mexico. It's so good. And I don't think I've spent more than like $50 on food yet.
Fish tacos, man.
Oh my, they're so good. Anyways, I think it's really important. And this is something that I push back on to a lot of people who are not tried and true Bitcoiners and people who try to sell me on Solana or whatever. It's like, at the end of the day, the amount of work and understanding the history of cryptography really lends itself to understanding why Bitcoin is the most superior form of a cryptocurrency. And it, again, I have yet to find a different cryptocurrency that is actually decentralized in the way that Bitcoin is, as purely as it is.
So here's the frame I use to understand it. And so there are legitimate, I would say by these ideas of crypto economics, whether they're good or not, or healthy or not, you can actually measure it, right? By using Bitcoin as water, as the elemental force and measurement. Now, I was able to use that tool to show the unhealthy crypto economic growth of Bitcoin Cash, because relative to Bitcoin on all these metrics, it had much lower exchange, everything pairs, volumes, much lower developer interest, much lower social, much lower on-chain stuff, but the social was almost as high, about half. And Samson Mao actually used my tool and to bring him up again on Twitter was like, this is what a social attack on Bitcoin looks like, because the social stuff relative to Bitcoin was so disproportionately large relative to the on-chain performance, the exchange interest, the developer interest, that it was clear that while crypto economic, while definitely a cryptocurrency, it was heavily slanted to social interest, which means scam. So here's the frame, here's the useful way to understand it. Cryptography is a rare discipline. In cryptography, the attacker, the other side of the equation, has a disproportionate amount of power, because one mistake can tear the whole thing down. One mistake. So the person who's thinking adversarially must anticipate all attacks. That takes Bitcoin out of consumer culture, consumer technology. People confuse consumer technology with Bitcoin when they say, oh, but this one's faster, or this one's better, or this one's this, and this one's that. So the truth is, because of the adversarial aspects of it, the longer it lives, the more it survives, the more valuable it is. And it eliminates it from the Nintendo or iPhone effect of the iPhone 12 and the 13, and I want the 14 and I want the 15. However, the whole rest of the market, truthfully, cryptocurrencies, crypto economics, but it's all consumer tech, right? So literally the faster one is better, because you're dealing with, it's okay, you can send a patch. It's like Zelda, like the bomb didn't blow up the wall, here's a patch. And in the case of Bitcoin, it's just not consumer tech. And people's minds aren't wired for that, because you were told your whole life that you need the new Nintendo and you need the new Xbox and you need the new iPhone, and you wanted it because it was better, right? It was actually better. New features, new this, new that. But in the world of cryptography, those are new attack vectors. Those are new unknowns. Those are new things you have to mitigate against. You can't just add stuff to it, because anything you add, you have to understand what doors you've opened. And that's what makes Bitcoin unique in cryptocurrency. So I won't say the only one. I'd say the only one that has to think adversarially to that level. The other ones have to do it a bit. But when I hear Solana versus Ethereum, for example, look, if you want not hard money and probabilistic math, let's ride it full power. Let's go, right? Let's not do half-half. Let's go full like Solana and do probabilistic math. Now, I see that as a video game. That's a video game. A video game for Wall Streeters. A real video game for them, though, and really applicable to the games they want to play. Whether or not there is still a finance sector when the Bitcoin standard runs through everything and changes our time perception and all that is a whole nother story. But for now, I say let the Wall Streeters party, because it's one giant wealth transfer. Let them go, right? Let them go. Watching crypto people rug Wall Street people is a show I would watch all day, every day, nonstop, all day long, all day long. And the truth is, in the same way that the Eurodollar came to help fiat grow psychologically to take over the whole world, one can argue that if we're going to democratize finance and democratize money and all that, that doesn't mean everyone just gets rich and hodls Bitcoin. That's fucking hard. So part of the answer is psychologically expand the space with all these other coins and let people learn lessons that we all have to learn. Some money is better than others. Gresham's law, right? And I don't want anyone to lose and all that stuff, but people can play, people can play.
I want to leave with this one piece of warning advice to all of you, if you're watching, who actually own any or hold any Solana. While I do agree with Nolan that like the idea of watching crypto enthusiasts rug pull the Wall Street elites, I'm all for it. Solana is such a Wall Street company. 90% of the tokens are already pre-mined and held by the VCs who invested in Solana's early days. So get ready for a dump. That is my 2 cents on Solana. That is not financial advice. Do with it as you see fit, but it is important to know who holds the majority of those coins and what they intend or what they can do with it. Can't do that with Bitcoin. I think that just about wraps up today's episode of the Breakup. And I think I'm also going to make the call that it's way too nice of a day here in Mexico for me to not dip out and go to the beach. So because I don't believe any of our bosses are watching, we're going to call today's episode of Bitcoin Magazine live. Absolutely done. Peace out, Nolan. Just a quick one more reminder. Use code YTMAG, get 10% off. If you're a stoner, come find me at the conference and we'll smoke a joint. On me, I'll smoke you up. In the meantime, guys, stay safe, be well, and stack sats. Thank you all.